My name is Naomi, 30 years old, and if I learned one thing that day, it's that silence can be louder than screaming. You'll get it when you have a real family, my mom said, smiling at her phone as she booked a cruise for my sister and her kids. The words hit harder than any slap could. I just stood there, my hands still wet from washing their dinner dishes. She didn't look at me when she said it. Maybe that made it worse. A real family. I looked at the photos on the fridge, my sister's perfect smiling crew, the cruise confirmation glowing on the screen, and then at my daughter's drawing pinned below them, the one nobody noticed. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask where I fit in that real definition. I went upstairs, folded Lila's clothes, packed my own, and slipped a short note under the salt shaker. Thanks for the roof. When the garage door creaked, I walked out with 2 duffel bags and my daughter's favorite blanket. My keys didn't make a sound when I set them down. No drama, no goodbye. Just the quiet decision that I was done begging to belong. Hours later, as the sky darkened over the highway, my phone lit up on the passenger seat. 35 missed calls. I turned it face down and kept driving. Because sometimes, the moment they finally notice you, it's already too late. Have you ever walked away without slamming the door? Your story might be the one that helps someone else do the same. The first night was colder than I expected. The hum of traffic replaced the sound of walls I no longer had. I watched the lights stretch across the windshield and tried to convince myself this was freedom, not exile. Lila slept curled against her blanket, her breath steady, trusting, unaware that the world outside our van could swallow us whole. I envied her peace. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment I closed that garage door. Not out of regret, out of disbelief that I finally did it. Every sound felt louder when there was nothing to separate us from the world. I counted cars to calm my nerves, whispered numbers into the dark like a secret prayer. Somewhere around 50, exhaustion took over. Morning came without warning. My neck ached from the seatbelt cutting across my shoulder. Lila yawned, asking when breakfast would start. I told her soon, though I didn't have an answer to what soon meant. I found a grocery store parking lot and parked near the delivery trucks, pretending we belonged there. Inside the restroom, the mirror flickered. I wiped Leela's face with a damp paper towel, tied her hair back, smiled like routine was enough to keep her world steady. At the coffee shop nearby, I asked for the smallest size. The barista gave me a look that lasted a little too long. I sat by the window, counting tips in my head before asking if they needed help. They didn't, but the motel across the street did. Cleaning rooms wasn't new to me. Work was work. For a week, that became our rhythm. Motel mornings, parking lot nights. Lila called it our moving house. I let her believe it. Children understand truth through tone, not detail. Rain came on the 3rd night. It sounded like applause on the metal roof. Lila laughed, thinking it was music. I held her closer, wondering when laughter started feeling like survival. Each day was a small gamble how far the gas would take us, how long before someone told us to move along. I learned which grocery stores didn't mind an old van sitting overnight, which gas stations had restrooms open all night, which guards looked the other way if you smiled. Hope arrived disguised as an elderly woman with a garden hose. She stood by a small house behind a hardware store, waving at me before I even noticed her. She asked if I was passing through or staying for a while. I didn't know how to answer. Her name was Mrs. Cohen, a widow who owned the lot behind her house. She said she rented the space to campers sometimes, as long as they were quiet. Her voice had the softness of someone used to silence. I offered to pay what I could. She waved her hand, saying we'd figure it out later. For the first time in weeks, I parked without fear of headlights tapping on the glass. That night, I opened a can of soup on a small stove and pretended it was a feast. Lila drew hearts in the fogged-up window. I watched her tiny fingers trace hope like it was something we could keep if we stayed still long enough. When she fell asleep, I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the empty dashboard reflection. My phone was still silent. I didn't want the noise back. The quiet now felt different, less like punishment, more like a beginning. Under the dim streetlight, the van didn't look like a failure anymore. It looked like a choice, a fragile one, but mine. Morning arrived softly, not with sunlight but with the faint click of the small fan on the dashboard. I'd started waking before it spun, counting the seconds between quiet and movement. Routine, even when improvised, can feel like safety. Lila stirred in the back, her hair wild from sleep. She asked if we could make pancakes like we used to. I smiled, though there was no flour, no eggs, no milk. What I had were cans, packets, and a dented pan that still believed in usefulness. I lined up what we owned: Beans, rice, instant noodles, half a jar of peanut butter, and a single apple. It wasn't much, but it was something I could control. Hunger, I'd learned, wasn't always about food. It was about purpose. When Lila began coloring on the inside of the van's door, I realized how still the world outside was. For the first time in months, nobody was waiting for me to fail. That silence gave me room to think differently. I balanced my phone on a cereal box, turned on the small lamp, and hit record. The camera shook with every breath, but I kept going. I spoke softly, explaining how to make a $1 dinner using pantry leftovers. I didn't sound like a teacher or a chef, more like a friend trying to stay steady. When I played it back, the video looked terrible. The sound crackled, my hands trembled, yet there was something honest about it. The image of Lila in the corner, humming while stacking cups, made the frame human, imperfect but alive. I uploaded it without overthinking. The internet didn't care about people like me, but posting it felt like a declaration. I'm still here. That night, I checked the upload again. 3 views, no comments, then a 4th, a 5th. The numbers didn't matter. What mattered was the act itself, proof that I existed outside survival. Days folded into each other. Between cleaning motel rooms and cooking small meals, I recorded more clips. Each video was a tiny diary, labeled with dates I didn't say aloud. How to stretch rice. 3 meals from 1 can of beans, dinner for $2. The titles sounded ordinary, but inside each one was a heartbeat. I didn't tell anyone. The channel was mine, a small rebellion disguised as a tutorial. Lila sometimes wandered into the frame, laughing when the spoon slipped. Her laughter softened the edges of everything. One afternoon, I returned from work to find a paper bag hanging from the van's mirror. Inside were vegetables, neatly packed, and a note written in a shaky hand. For your next recipe, Mrs. C. The kindness caught me off guard. Gratitude came with a lump in my throat. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. Someone saw us without judgment. That evening, I cooked with those vegetables slowly, carefully, savoring the act of creating rather than surviving. I filmed it again, this time smiling. The van filled with steam and something close to hope. I didn't check my phone until midnight. The earlier video, $1 dinner, had 47 views. There was a comment under it. This made me feel less alone. That sentence stayed in my chest longer than any meal. For the first time, I thought maybe this wasn't just survival content. Maybe it was connection. I kept recording. Every small noise, every scrape of the spoon, every inhale before I spoke became part of a new rhythm. I wasn't running anymore. I was building something, one view at a time. And when I looked at Lila asleep, her cheeks warm from a real meal, I felt something simple and extraordinary. We were okay for tonight. That was enough. The screen on my phone glowed like a small heartbeat in the dark. Numbers had never meant much to me before, but watching the subscriber count crawl toward 1,000 felt like witnessing a tiny miracle. Somewhere out there, people I would never meet were choosing to listen. The van had become more than shelter, it was a stage, a kitchen, a confessional. Every video I made was a thread holding my days together. When the number finally hit 1,000, I didn't celebrate. I just sat still, letting the quiet stretch, afraid that if I moved, it would all disappear. It didn't. The next morning, my inbox filled with messages, strangers sharing how they'd lost their jobs, their homes, their sense of belonging. Each story echoed something inside me. I responded to everyone, not as a creator, but as someone learning to exist again. Then came a name I hadn't seen in months. Brielle. Her message was short, polished, the way she'd always spoken when she wanted something. She wrote about collaboration, about how my little cooking channel could become a family project. The word family stung more than I wanted to admit. Before I could decide whether to answer, another notification appeared. Diane. My mother had followed the channel. Her profile picture was the same, smiling beside my sister's 2 kids. Perfect lighting, perfect posture. No trace of me anywhere. The first comment she left under my video was harmless on the surface. You've always been creative, honey. But beneath it, I felt the weight of all the things she never said when I needed her most. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My silence wasn't anger, it was protection. Over the next few days, I noticed a pattern. They began liking every video, leaving small comments that read more like reminders. Proud of you. We always knew you'd find your way. Family means everything. Those words used to comfort me. Now they felt like a net being quietly pulled tighter. One morning, I woke to find that they had created a group chat called Our Strong Girls. The irony almost made me laugh. The first message was from my mother, filled with cheerful emojis and an invitation for lunch. Brielle followed with a picture of her children baking cookies, captioned, "Maybe you could teach us some of your recipes?" My stomach tightened as I read. I could almost hear their voices, warm, practiced, public. They were experts at pretending the past didn't exist. I deleted the chat without opening it again. The next video I filmed felt heavier. My hands shook while chopping vegetables. The camera picked up every breath. I told myself I was just tired, but the truth was sharper. I was afraid. Afraid that letting them in again would undo everything I'd built. Each night, I checked the comment section and saw their names climbing to the top, always visible, always present. It was a quiet invasion. When I looked at Lila playing outside with a stick she pretended was a magic wand, I realized how much she'd grown without their noise. Her laughter no longer echoed off walls that didn't belong to us, it filled open air. That's when I understood why they were really reaching out. Not for love, not for reconciliation, but for relevance. The moment I became visible, I became useful again. The following week, one of my videos, Breakfast Under $2, was shared by a small local blog. Views tripled overnight. New subscribers flooded in, strangers calling me inspiring. It should have felt good. Instead, it made the silence from my family louder. That evening, I stepped outside to breathe. The sky had turned violet, the kind of color that makes you believe in second chances. For a moment, I thought I heard my name from across the street. I turned. There she was. My mother, Diane, standing near the van with a paper bag in her hand, the same smile she wore in every photo. I didn't move. The distance between us felt measured not in steps, but in years. And for the first time, I realized I had no desire to close it. Afternoons in late summer have a strange stillness, like the world is holding its breath. That's how it felt when I stepped out of the van and saw my mother standing there. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her presence filled every inch of space between us. Her hands were clasped around a paper bag, the same way she used to hold gifts she didn't want to give. I waited for words that didn't come. When she finally spoke, it wasn't kindness, it was calculation. She began talking about Brielle, how things had been hard for them lately, how her husband was in between jobs. She said it in that careful tone she used when guilt was supposed to sound like love. I listened without moving. The air was thick enough to taste. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. "You've been doing well. Maybe now you can help the family that helped you." Help. The word echoed like an accusation. I thought about the months I'd lived under their roof, cooking, cleaning, shrinking myself to fit. That wasn't help to her. That was repayment. She started to list ideas. Maybe I could feature Brielle in one of my videos. Maybe I could promote her family business. Each suggestion was wrapped in a smile, but underneath it I heard the old hierarchy returning. I realized, standing there beside the van, that this wasn't a visit, it was a transaction. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was the effort of staying calm. I told myself to breathe, to remember that silence is still a form of power. From the porch, Mrs. Cohen appeared, pretending to water her plants. Her eyes met mine, steady, unafraid. It reminded me that I wasn't alone anymore, not really. My mother kept talking, her voice rising, trying to fill the space that used to belong to her authority. She mentioned family loyalty, shared blood, obligation, every word stacked like bricks building a wall I'd already torn down. I didn't interrupt. There was nothing left to argue. When she finally paused, expecting agreement, I stepped closer, not to close the distance, but to draw a line she couldn't cross. The look on her face shifted, recognition flickering for a split second. I wasn't the daughter who begged for approval anymore. She muttered something about pride and how it ruins good people. Then she turned toward her car, shaking her head like I'd failed a test I never signed up for. The sound of the engine starting was softer than I imagined, but it left a weight behind. Inside the van, Lila was drawing shapes on the window again. Her quiet joy steadied me. I sat beside her, breathing in the scent of crayons and soup, two things that belonged only to us. I didn't cry. There wasn't grief left, only release. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone blinked on the counter, lighting up the small space with a familiar notification tone. I almost ignored it until I saw the name. Ethan. My ex-husband hadn't contacted me since the divorce was finalized. His message was short. "Proud of you. Let's talk." I stared at the screen, unmoving. The timing was too perfect, too predictable. When you start to build something, the people who helped break it always find their way back. I turned off the phone and watched the shadows climb the van's ceiling. It wasn't sadness that kept me awake, it was clarity. The kind that arrives after you stop hoping people will change and start trusting yourself to survive when they don't. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to protect. Not the past, not their approval, just the small, quiet world I was finally building with my daughter. Nights inside the van had become a rhythm of stillness until the phone lit up again. The name on the screen carried a familiar weight, the kind that used to make my stomach twist. Ethan. His message was simple. Proud of you. Let's talk. I stared at it long enough for the screen to dim. Pride, in his language, always meant possession. Once, I might have answered. Now, I just watched the notification fade like smoke. The next morning, another message appeared longer this time, full of nostalgia and careful flattery. He mentioned how he'd seen my videos, how I looked different, how we could work together again. The words blurred into one steady hum of entitlement. I didn't reply. Later that week, I found something stranger. A new account had uploaded one of my old videos, the same lighting, same van, same title, but now stamped with a line beneath it. Managed by Ethan. My chest went cold. It wasn't just theft, it was erasure. I reported it quietly, filling out the form like someone paying a final bill. The platform removed it within a day. He never learned that I'd seen. For a brief moment, I thought that was the end of it. But trouble travels in packs. Brielle appeared next, not in person but online. She'd posted a new fundraiser titled, Help My Sister Rebuild. The story beneath it read like a fiction I didn't write, that I'd fallen on hard times, that she was stepping up for family. The comments were filled with sympathy, money pledges, hearts. I read it twice, numb. The photo she used was one of my old thumbnails, cropped to make me look fragile. She'd turned my survival into a brand. I reported that too. The platform flagged it for misrepresentation. Within hours, donations froze and the page went silent. When I checked social media again, Brielle had vanished. Her profile gone. Not deleted, just scrubbed clean. The digital version of pretending nothing ever happened. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. The kind that can't be crossed, no matter how many words or pictures someone tries to send. Days blurred together. I filmed new content recipes built from what we had, not what we lacked. My audience grew quietly, steadily. It wasn't fame, it was stability. Then came an email from a small food brand based in Oregon. They'd watched my series about $1 dinners and wanted to send a care package, no contracts, no pressure, just appreciation. A week later, another message arrived from a company offering a 3-month sponsorship. I reread it 3 times, half expecting it to disappear. When the first payment landed in my account, I didn't celebrate. I sat in silence, tracing the numbers on the screen. Proof. Not of luck, but of endurance. Mrs. Cohen noticed, of course. She started leaving small notes on my van door. Proud of you, kid. Keep going. They weren't heavy with meaning. They were simple, grounding. The kind of words that don't ask for anything in return. Meanwhile, my mother and sister grew quieter. Their silence wasn't peace, it was resentment muting itself. No more comments under my posts, no more group chats, no more casual claims of support. When the noise stopped, I realized something I hadn't before. Peace doesn't always sound like forgiveness. Sometimes it's just absence. I fixed the broken burner with part of my first check, bought new curtains for the van, and a proper sleeping mat so Lila could stretch out at night. The space felt larger, softer, almost like home. One evening, while uploading a new video, I scrolled past Ethan's profile one last time. It was empty. No followers, no uploads, no trace. Deleted, like the past version of me that once needed permission to exist. I closed the laptop and exhaled. Everything I'd lost had turned into space for something else. The van hummed softly with the small power unit. The air smelled like simmering rice and detergent. Outside, the world went on without demanding my apology. I had no desire to reclaim what was gone. It was already mine again because I'd stopped letting them define what survival looked like. The mornings felt different now. Quieter but not empty. The kind of quiet that comes after a long storm when you finally realize nothing is chasing you anymore. Lila had started sleeping later, her breathing steady, her small body stretched across the mat like a question finally answered. The van, once cramped and restless, now felt almost deliberate, every object chosen, every inch accounted for. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the small curtain gap, I found myself opening the back doors to let it in. The air smelled faintly of detergent and pine, the world unedited and kind. I checked the channel metrics out of habit. The numbers kept moving, slow and steady, like the tide. Not viral, not explosive, just growing. Real. A few messages waited in the inbox, One from a shelter asking to feature my cooking tutorials, another from a teacher saying her students watched my budget breakfast videos during class. Small things, but they felt like proof that what I'd built had roots beyond survival. Later, I brewed instant coffee and watched the steam rise. It wasn't luxury, but it was peace. I used to think success would look like being welcomed back by family, by someone's approval. But now, it looked like this: a quiet van, a full mug, a sleeping child, and a life that no one else could rewrite. Outside, Mrs. Cohen waved from her garden. She'd started wearing a straw hat too big for her head, and every time I saw it, it made me smile. Her kindness had been the first thing that didn't demand repayment. Sometimes, the urge to look back still came what-ifs, could-haves, maybes. They arrived like faint radio signals, distant and uninvited. But I didn't tune in anymore. The silence that followed wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. In the evenings, after uploading a video, I'd take Lila for a short walk. We'd collect leaves, stones, things without value but full of story. She'd hand me each one like a gift, and I'd pocket them as if they were proof that the world still gave more than it took. The first check from the sponsorship arrived. I transferred a small portion into savings and spent the rest fixing the van new tires, a working heater, a tiny fold-out table. It wasn't much, but it was ours. A week later, a message appeared in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. No name, no greeting, just a sentence. Family is still family. I read it once, twice, then deleted it without hesitation. The truth is, family isn't a title, it's a choice, and I had already chosen mine. That night, I sat by the van door, looking out at the streetlights trembling against the sky. The city hummed quietly, a sound that once scared me. Now it felt like a lullaby. I thought about how many years I'd spent trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. All the times I said yes when I wanted to scream no. All the apologies I made just to keep peace in a war I didn't start. And how, in the end, the only way to win was to walk away. Lila stirred in her sleep, mumbling a dream. I brushed a curl from her forehead and realized she would never have to unlearn what I did. She'd know that love doesn't have to be begged for, that silence can be safety, and that starting over isn't failure, it's faith in motion. Before turning off the lights, I wrote one last sentence in the small notebook I kept beside the bed. You don't have to go back to be free. I closed it and exhaled. Outside, the night softened, the van steady as a heartbeat. Tomorrow would come with its usual demands: filming, editing, surviving, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The road ahead wasn't a promise. It was a direction. And for the first time in my life, I was finally driving toward it without looking back.